Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
Here we go.
What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode 64 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. I'm Kyle Sutherland. I want to welcome you on to a spring break edition. Hope you're all having a safe and fun one. I know there's some teams who are playing at various spots around the state. Of course, we've got a big tournament later this week. As we record on this Wednesday here, we've got a big tournament happening in Central Arkansas via the Robinson Senators that are hosting that. And we'll talk a little about that and get into, of course, the rest of the discussion. But we'll bring in the baseball guru, Mr. Kevin Bohannon. Kevin, I think Kevin's with us. Hold on one sec here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, I think that's weird. It's black. I don't know how that happened. I can see you, but your camera might be off. But Kevin, it's been crazy. I know for everybody, of course, going from basketball into baseball, really just the spring sports in general. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind, but now we're usually spring break is about when we get into the nitty gritty. Of course, now we get to the state races and all those good things, but now we're kind of getting in a flow of the actual spring sports season.
Yeah, but by spring break, conference season has usually started for every conference, every classification. There are some smaller conferences in 1A, 2A that just play single round robins. There's only like 5 or 6 teams. So spring break is when they really kick things off after they get back. So you've had a lot of teams travel. Greene County Tech went out to South Carolina to play at Myrtle Beach. The Cal Ripken Experience out there, Ebbets Field. They took their JV and varsity teams out there and went a combined 7-1-2, which was a great experience for those kids. So good times out there. Brooklyn went down to Alabama. Fayetteville's in Orlando, actually Davenport, Florida at the moment, right outside of Orlando. They had a good game the other night. Mark Brissy looked good on the mound. So it's good that Sylvan Hills went over to Memphis to play at the Perfect Game event over the tournament over there at the Mid-South USA Stadium. It's always a good experience over there. Talked to Coach Zach James yesterday. So, yeah, it's good that, I love spring break tournaments in Central Arkansas. It goes back to when I played in high school, and the Metro Invitational was always such a big deal around that time because, so many good teams in the central part of the state. But, what Robinson's done is, take that and taking it to another level.
Yeah, no doubt about it. 77, and we won't get too deep into that because I know that you guys did a breakout show to talk just about every bit of it. I know Coach Delaney did a phenomenal job of talking about some of those teams, breaking down some of their top players. So you can check that out, of course, on the Natural State Sports Network YouTube channel for that. But yeah, 77 teams. Is it 6 or 8 locations?
8. Yeah. So, Diamond Sports, which is Maumelle, is only hosting like JV, like maybe for 2 days. But yeah, 8 at one point there will be 8 different fields around Central Arkansas.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know we got some weather coming in that's going to maybe hopefully not, but maybe put a damper on some things. But I think that we should be able to get most of those in. Okay, and so we will get into the 1A through 6A, just kind of talking about some of our Super 7 rankings and all that like we typically do, starting in 6A. Before we do that, I do want to give some quick love to the people that are making this show possible. Of course, our friends at Athletic Field Service of Arkansas, lip removal, edging, anything you need for a natural surface, you can give them a call. Jeremy Rice is your man. AFS, Athletic Field Service of Arkansas. Also, Boom Boom Floor Shine down in covering the Southwest Arkansas area. If you need some TLC for your VCT, be sure and give them a call, 870-833-0521. And then also Chinook Cedary. Head over to ChinookCedary.com. You can get 10% off your order by putting in referral code NSS Media. So let's get right into it. Starting in Class 6A, Kevin, the big news from that is we have a new number 1 team. Conway coming in this week at 9-0. They took down Class 5A number 1 and defending 5A champion Valley View 5-2. If I remember right, the Blazers actually led that one. Or was it Valley View led 4-0 after 3, or Conway did. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, Conway
so
really kind
Conway
of jumped
did.
out, but it was close, 5-2 overall. So
Yeah, really big win for the Wampus Cats there.
Yeah, really big. So Conway's been playing on another level. Kind of the same formula Leighton Hardin did back in 2022 when they won when he won his first state championship there. 3 pitchers, Owen Davenport. They kind of just Bo Billick. They don't overthrow these guys. They go 2 innings, 3 innings, and they'll use those guys quite a couple times during the week. You don't stretch out a guy for 115 pitches and then put him on the shelf for 5 days. So it's a good formula that's worked for them. Plus, they got Sean Cover, who started out on a tear. He was one of our team-funded player of the weeks. I think he was week 2. Even though week 1 he was up there with Landon Schaefer. Just unbelievable start. He's hitting like 600. I know he's hitting 650 coming into this week. 18 RBIs. And they just got Max Holland back, 2026 Razorback commit. Had his first game last week, 3 for 4, 3 doubles. Welcome back, Max. So, yeah, Conway and Fayetteville are kind of at the top right there. Fayetteville split with Rogers last week. That's what dropped them. Look, no harm in losing to Rogers. Rogers is really good. They've been in the state championship last year. Jake Taylor, they lost 16-1 to Bentonville, like their first game. And I'm like, what in the world happened? So, Bentonville has the potential. They're number 7 right now. You could really put Heritage, Cabot, North Little Rock, Bentonville, Little Rock Christian Harbor, even Fort Smith Northside, kind of in one little ball. And those teams could beat each other on any given day. I just see Conway and Fayetteville are just a little ahead right now. In a 1-game situation, Landon Schaefer was no-hitting Rogers through 4 innings last week, and he pulled his hamstring. They scored 5 runs off the next pitcher with no outs, and they went to Jason Delmar. Delmar shut them down. So things happen in baseball. Razorbacks got beat on Tuesday 14-13 and blew a 5-run lead in the 9th inning. So baseball's a dirty mistress.
And I wanted to ask you about Fort Smith Northside, because I know that was kind of one that we talked a good bit about last year, and they've got some really good prospects on that team. Now, coming into this week, I know they lost 4 of 5. They've been flirting with that outside looking in range. As you said, I mean, there's so many baseball, softball on either side. There's so many teams that you could probably put in various spots just as we're at about the halfway point of the season. But they're playing, I think, in Tennessee this week, got a win over a Forest and Tennessee team, and then also a Plano, Illinois squad. So, they started off well there, even though that they came into spring break on a little bit of a skid. How do you see things turning out for the Grizzlies in the back half?
McLean Moody can beat anybody. It's just the fact of, are they going to make errors? Are they going to hit the ball? Okay, they can score. They lost to Springdale Harbor 10-9. Okay, they got to Luke Cornelison, who's a Razorback commit, who I think is going to end up pitching at Fayetteville instead of playing third base. So it's just a matter of playing clean baseball from here on out.
And then that 5 and 6 spot, Cabot, North Little Rock, because as we talked about we discussed how deep the West is every single year, and then Conway's in the number 1 spot right now, and then of course 2 through 4, you've got the West teams. So how have you seen it playing out so far for the Panthers as well as the Charging Wildcats?
Yeah, Cabot beat North Little Rock 7-5. Jackson Estes started out really good this year. He beat Bryant in the conference opener. They beat Little Rock Christian. So they're 4-1 in conference play right now. And, they've played really well. Catcher Will Jones hit a couple of home runs. Cody Dillon's done a great job with those guys. So I really think that, North Little Rock is down. They're not back to their championship days under Gary Davis or Randy Sandiford by any means, but they're playing at a higher level, and that's what Coach Dillon wants at this point. Cabot, Leslie on the mounds going to Arkansas State. Cale Turner still hasn't thrown that much. Jacob Murray. Cabot's really loaded right now. They seem to be about that second team in the Central right now.
Then down in Class 5A, there's always, it seems, a lot going on in that classification. Of course, we're going to get to see a lot of these teams that you saw in the Super 7 this week. We're going to see, or a good bit of them at least, we'll see in the Robinson Invitational this week. But Valley View, 7-1, and coming in on the week at least at 7-1. They hold on to that number 1 spot. But I know the West is a conference that we talk a whole lot about in conversation. And, of course, we've got Russellville at number 2. You you think about Tristan Newberry, Russ Martin, that's another team right there that, of course, I know we talked a good bit about in the preseason, but is just loaded on the mound.
Absolutely. And Tristan Newberry really, he was our newcomer of the year last year, that putting out when we did our all Arkansas teams. And he got stronger. He's in the low 90s now. So 6'4", 200, 210, just keeps getting better. And, talking the coaching staff over there, this kid just went to work. Cade Palmer's committed to Little Rock. Russ Martin made a smart decision. Look, he's an older guy for the 2025 class, and he knew if he wanted to pitch now, the better chance was going to be to pitch at Little Rock. So kudos for him being mature about his situation. And with the rosters cutting down next year for college baseball to 34, NIL, just a lot of different factors go into that. So some kids that committed as a freshman and sophomore are really opening up their minds to JUCO, to going to other places. And I think UCA, Little Rock, Arkansas State, those teams that aren't quite on an SEC level right now are going to benefit from that. So, kudos to Russ Martin and the coaches for educating these kids. I really like Russellville. The West is going to be rough, man. Mountain Home started out 5-0. Robinson beat them 2-0. They got a win over – starts with an A, and they're in Alabama. I don't want to mispronounce the city name, but they got a win down in Alabama at Gulf Shores. So they got their first win down there. That was big for the Bombers. And then Van Buren, Weston Wilcox. Greenwood's played well. They lost 19-10 to Fayetteville. They lost to Bentonville and Bentonville West. That's their only three losses Bentonville West and Benton. Benton beat them 8-0. So, Greenwood's, they could be in the outside looking in right now. Sylvan Hills is one of those teams had ranked early in the season. I know we're talking about the West, but Sylvan Hills in the Central is going to be tough. Look, Zach James, they just has to figure out who their end of the week guy is going to be. Everett Bird's good. He's hitting 500 on the year. He was 5 for 5 with multiple extra base hits over in Memphis this week. Caleb Harrison's really good on the mound. So they just got to figure out who their number 3 guy is going to be. And the usual suspects, Maumelle and Russellville. But, Kyle, let's talk about the South. 5A South.
Lake Hamilton is they're using multiple arms, I've noticed.
Yeah. Matt Wiggin, he was my coach of the year last year just for what he did, taking the Wolves to the semifinals. You lose Easton Hurley, and you think, they're going to take a step back. But they play Legion ball, and Legion's really picked up around the state. It gives that sense of community, everything really clicking for, their program over there. And he would send me updates throughout the summer on some of his young kids that were playing really well, that were going to contribute this year. And sure enough, he brought that to apparition. So, Lake Hamilton started out, they lost to Arkansas High, which, Texarkana a couple years ago won their first conference title in like 30 years. But they lost 5-4. But they turned around and beat Hot Springs Lakeside. That was big. They beat them 5-2. And they beat Sheridan. So they're sitting on top of the 5A South right now. Lakeside's off to a hot start, 10-2. Love the Rams. Love what they're doing down there. Drew Morgan's been really good. Hit a 2-run home run against Lake Hamilton. So they just got to figure out some pitching. That's their weak link right now. If you remember a few years ago when Little Rock Christian was on their way to a state title, Wyatt Gibson almost derailed the Warriors' shot in the first round. They had Lakeside had them beat in the first round up until the last inning. So Lakeside knows how to get there. It's just going to be a good race for them in Lake Hamilton. Don't forget about Sheridan. I think they're 9-4 on the year right now. Good. Peyton Sterrett's really good. I like him on the mound. They've got a couple other guys to watch out for. Pitching's going to be really deep for them, just like all Mike Moore teams. Really well coached. Pitching, defense. Just got to figure out a way to score some runs.
Yeah, the Sterrett name is very popular in Sheridan, right? You think of Peyton, of course, in baseball, and then Skylar, the Arkansas commit in softball. Her little sister, Sadie, is now the starting center fielder for the Lady Yellow Jackets. So, the Sterrett's making big a lot of big time contributions into the spring sports season for the Yellow Jackets overall. And then Lake Hamilton, you mentioned, of course, last year, just they made that big run, and then now you got Coy Autry, Eli Stack, Landon West, Blaine Cribb that are really just putting in some good innings for them. Yeah. I wanted to ask you too, circling back to the West a little bit, Van. We talk about strength of schedule. All of you and I and Jared on the softball, we always talk about strength of schedule and how important that is. Van Buren has played maybe the toughest in 5A or up there. You think about Fayetteville, Russellville twice, Rogers Heritage. We're going to see them against Little Rock Christian in the Robinson tournament, and so a Robinson Invitational. And they look at their record. Okay, yeah, that's all you look at. You're not going to think they're a very good team, but this strength of schedule is probably going to bode well for them, you would think, in the back half of the year.
Yeah, they've lost 5 straight, I think. Yeah, they beat Paris on March 10th. Lost to Fayetteville. No harm done there. Bill West is okay, but they're 6A school. Then they lost a doubleheader to Russellville. So not where they want to be right now, but they're going to be fine later in the year. Those guys are still pretty young over there. They play Little Rock Christian, Magnolia, and Monticello. Magnolia won the 4A South Regional last year. Monticello, I think, was the 2 seed out of that regional. So good schedule for them this week. I'm really looking forward to that Little Rock Christian game. That's tomorrow at 3 o'clock. At Little Rock Christian. So if you're in Central Arkansas, you want a chance to get out and see that game, head on over to Highway 10. Should be a great outing.
Yeah, also, you mentioned Maumelle a second ago. Their 3 losses are to Class 5A number 1 Valley View, 6A number 1 Conway, and then 5A number 2 Russellville. So nothing to shake a stick at there. And then a team out of the you also talked about Sylvan Hills. They had that 1-2 run at the USA Stadium Challenge in Millington, Tennessee. Overall, a pretty good showing. Played some great competition there. In the Central, BB, the Badgers, we discussed them a good bit in 2024.
Great journeyman.
Yeah, absolutely. You think about their losses, Valley View, Cabot, Benton, all ranked teams. The Valley View loss, that was a pretty lopsided one, but for the most part, I think the Badgers have looked pretty well. Of course, they've got the 5A Central doubleheader, a big one with Sylvan Hills. Really coming back from spring break, they have a massive week, have that doubleheader with Sylvan Hills, and also take on number 1 from 4A, Harding Academy, to close the week.
Yeah, and big win for them was against Benton. They split with Benton. So that kind of throws a kink in the 5A Central standings or how it's going to end up towards the end of the year. I knew they were on to something last couple of years. Chance Cleveland's done a great job. Real big fan of his. But Grant Jernigan is a player. He's going to go play JUCO ball. At some point, people were asking me if he was committed to Arkansas State. He wasn't, but I think he could play at that level for sure. I mean, kid can swing it. He's big. Physical, get out, so if they can, because they almost beat Maumelle last year, and Maumelle was, not playing well at the time, and BB was, so it's going to be tough. If you look at the Central, you got Benton, Sylvan Hills, Maumelle. Is BB the 4th team, or is, somebody else going to jump up in there? It's going to be interesting to see over the next few weeks.
Then on down to 4A, we'll go ahead and get the Region 1, Conference 1 conversation out, because that's one that we always discuss, and, we'll just start right there since it's the first numerically. And right now, Gentry Pioneers, they sit at the top of the standings. They're doing a great job in year 2 under Coach Nell. And I know that this was a team that he felt like was going to take some pretty big strides. Still a long ways to go to decide this, as we have seen in previous years. But how do you see that shaking out?
Prairie Grove has had some good wins. They've also had some bad losses. Mitch Cameron's team, has got a couple of guys back from last year that, they could make some noise at the end of the year. So Shallow Christian, they're younger. They're learning how to play under Alan Gum right now. And once they figure it out and the light bulb goes off, they're going to be fine. Gravett has been a state playoff team the last couple of years. Hosted the 4A state championships last year, the tournament. Excuse me, not the championships, but, it's so deep up there. They don't have Farmington in there anymore, so that's a little different. Pea Ridge is not going to be up there, but Gravett, Prairie Grove, Shallow, got some young guys. It's in Gentry. Drew Nash for Coach Anthony Nails got like a .58 ERA right now, just outstanding. So on the mound, at the plate, Nash is going to be a problem for some people. They play a single round robin, then they do a district tournament. So that's really why nobody's really played a conference game yet. They like to get them all in after spring break. I think they play 2 games a week. So then they roll with that. End of April, they'll do a district tournament and go right into regionals.
Another really deep conference, which not shocked at all that this was going to happen. You pretty much predicted this, and we had a feeling this is how it would go out. But you look at the what is that, the 4A5 North, I guess, with North. It still throws me off with that conference being split North and South. But Harding Academy and Robinson, you look at the first 2 spots in the Super 7 rankings this week. Also, Pulaski Academy checking in there at 4. And you've also got a Morrilton team in that's 6-2 that, of course, is in year 1 under Mike Lee. That's obviously a very established coach and athletic director. So, as expected, we're getting about what we thought we would get so far.
Absolutely. And PA and Morrilton split. Harding Academy swept Morrilton. CAC and PA split. That was a shocker. PA got Svoboda, who's going to go to UCA. Ace DeWeese, little lefty, 84, 86, can be at 87. Tough as nails on the mound. Had a complete game last week. So, I think PA, once they put everything together, Billy Adams has been there for a while now. I think 20 years. So, they've had some good runs lately, when they had Ingscove and, of course, my man Kel Busby, who's down at Texas A&M Texarkana right now playing for Chase Brewster, was with Arkansas in the fall. So, PA is going to be good. Wynn moved from the 3-4A, which was Murderers Row with Brooklyn and everybody, to the 6-4A. So it's them and Stuttgart. Those are the top 2 teams. The Helena. I don't even know the other teams in the Forest City. Just not really good baseball over there. So Stuttgart and Wynn's going to be the top out of there. The 4A5 South has Bauxite, Eastham, Mills, Fountain Lake. So either Eastham or Mills is going to make a regional tournament. That's messed up. I'm just going to be honest. I hate saying that because I went to Mills and we were a powerhouse back in the late 90s. Up until the early 2000s, Mills was one of the best baseball programs in the state, no matter the classification. So it is what it is. The 7 and the 8 are going to be really tricky in how they play out because last year, Crossit won the 8. They've got 3 guys back there, 4-year starters. Magnolia won the regional, and Monticello finished number 2. Nashville's playing well. They got Chambers back. Caden. It's Caden. He played quarterback too, right? I'm not missing.
Carson. Yeah.
So Carson Chambers is back. He looked really good 2 years ago as a freshman. So he's back from his injury. So Nashville, DeQueen's 7-0 right now. They made some noise last year. It beat Ashdown, beat Camden. They, right there at the end of it. So a lot of parity and balance in Class 4A. That's what we were wanting. Gosnell, who moved up from Class 3A, won Class 3A last year. Aaron Cooch's team. I think they're 4-3, and they've lost by 10 runs 3 times, and they've run-ruled people 3 times. So they got a tough early schedule. They did lose to Riverside, which is the top team in 2A, which we'll get to in a minute. But, just a lot of balance in Class 4A, which I'm really looking forward to this year.
I think that was probably the thing that I noticed most when I was prepping for 4A was especially in the 4A7, pick your conference, girls basketball, baseball, football. It's always pretty loaded. Then you think about DeQueen and Nashville, Magnolia, Arkadelphia 7-2. And I think they've got a win over Woodlawn, which it's a 4A over a 2A, but you get a win over a Woodlawn squad. That's pretty good. So a lot of parity there. And then on that Eastern region, Wynn was a sub 500 team last year, maybe a game or
they played so below expectations, and they get everybody back. Gray Westbrook going to 3 Rivers next year, mid-80s arm, big physical righty on the mound. He can beat just about anybody. So a lot of people, that I've talked to over the eastern part of the state, everybody, that's the name that kept coming up as kind of not a dark horse because they haven't really been a state title contender in baseball, but they're a team that everybody kind of said they're going to be good. They got a lot of people back. So, and they've proven it so far. They're 6-3, got some good wins. I look for them in Stuttgart to go head to head in that 4A6 conference.
And I was going to touch on Robinson too a little bit more because right now that's another one, kind of like I was saying a second ago with, I think I was touching on Van Buren that's played a really tough schedule. As you would expect, the defending 4A runner-up has done the exact same thing. Of course, they split with Harding Academy. The Senators dominated that first game, then fell by a run in the second. Also, they've lost to Valley View Conway, a really good Sterlington, Louisiana team that's got – Sterlington's a great softball and baseball program. Loaded. Yeah, loaded team. I think they're 3A in Louisiana, and their softball team actually started like nationally ranked top 20. So yeah, really good spring sports down there in Sterlington. And then also I think they lost to Maumelle by a run as well, and then had that 2-0 win over Mountain Home. So if that doesn't tell you anything about just we touched on it at the top of 4A how deep this conference is going to be, but Robinson could be due for a tear here as we get into the back half.
Yeah, Logan Eichler and Peyton Lee went head-to-head for 5 innings in that game. Robinson scored first, so they were up 1-0 on Maumelle. Bowman Stein has been a really good transfer from Little Rock Catholic. Hit a couple home runs this year so far. Had a couple D1 offers. Really good academic kid. Went to school with his brother, not his brother. That makes me really old. No, his dad. His dad, Carter Stein. And his uncle, Kurt Stein, was actually in my class, played baseball with him. But, I think Robinson and Coach Delaney will always undersell it. I'm the one that has to oversell it for him because he knows how good they can be. And I think this year, next year is their window. Last year, they were premature, but they got there. They upset Lone Oak in the regional and the state tournament to get to UCA last year. I just think, Eichler just keeps getting better. I want to see him take a big velo jump. Seems like he's been in the mid-80s for a while now. I know he can get to 89, 90, but he sits comfortable at 84, 86. When he gets to that, upper 80s, lower 90s, he's going to be one of those guys. He's already really good. He's going to be a dominant arm that I don't think anybody will be able to touch.
And heading down to Class 3A, you look at Ashdown, Genoa Central, two very familiar teams there that you've got at the top of the Super 7. But the Manila Lions, they had a losing record, finished with a 9-10 record, I believe it was last year. And this year off to a really fast start. Talk about that start by the Lions.
Yeah, and kind of came out of nowhere. The conference is really kind of quacky. They got 3 teams that are tied like 4-1 on top of the conference. Newport being one of them. Newport's not a team that's been, a baseball powerhouse. They were, they've got some tradition there. Late 90s, they had a guy named Zach Harris that was really good. They made it to the 3A semifinals in 1997. Lost in extra innings to a really good Mills Comets team. Knock, knock. So they do have some tradition there in Newport. So, they started out 5-0, lost a couple of games. But Manila, they beat Newport. They beat Walnut Ridge. That's a really good win for that program because Walnut Ridge is ranked. So if they can just stay with it, they play a double round robin in that conference. So they'll get to see every team twice. Corning's one of those teams that's right up there as well. So if Manila can just stay on it, they're going to be right there at the end of the season with a chance to get to a regional tournament in the state.
And speaking of deep conferences there, if you look, I guess that'd be the 3A7 with Ashdown and Genoa Central. Of course, Ashdown moved down from Class 4A. Yep. Both of those teams are doing really well, obviously being at number 1 and number 2. So unsurprisingly, some really good baseball in Class 3A played down there in Southwest Arkansas.
Absolutely. Bismarck's in there. They've got some good young talent. And then the HGOC, Harmony Grove, Ouachita County moved over there from the 8 to the 7. So that just made it even deeper. Harmony Grove, Haskell moved out. They're in the 6, I think. They're in the Central Conference now, what I call the Central Conference. So it just made it a little bit deeper. And, Melbourne, one of those teams in North Central Arkansas, they should roll through their conference pretty easily. They're 3-0 right now, 6-0 overall. And then kind of outside lurking in River Valley Schools, Booneville, they've played well. They've had a good run the last couple of years. Elkins swept Greenland last week or 2 weeks ago. So Elkins always a good one to watch out for. Won 4 straight conference titles. Regionals 2 out of the last 3 years. Watch out for Charleston and then Smackover.
On the other side of there in the southeast part, I know right before spring break, Rising got the big win over DeWitt, and you kind of had a feeling that probably that conference is going to come down to those two. I think maybe Drew Central might have been one of the other ones that we discussed, but probably looking like the Dragons and Wildcats in that mix. So, a little bit of a shaky start for Rising, but that was a big win for them to build off of, no doubt.
Yeah, lost to Wall Charter at the beginning of the season. Chad Cope's second year. Coach Cope's one of the best coaches in the state of Arkansas. Was at North Little Rock. Watson Chapel is where, he really kind of made his name, taking the Wildcats to a state championship or two. So, Coach Cope, the guys are going to go out and play hard. And I think they'll end up winning the conference now because they've already beat Drew Central and they beat DeWitt. So they're in the driver's seat right now. They need that. And I'm going to stress the importance of this because it's been 2 years in a row, the 7 swept the 8. Last year, the 8 got HGOC in, and they made the semifinal run. So for Rising to get that 1 seed going into the regional tournament is huge because they'll end up playing a 4 seed who it might be Bismarck or Genoa Central, somebody tough like that. You never know what could happen from there. But Ashdown, lineup-wise, they have the most talent. It's just a matter of, can they put it all together? Like I mentioned before on here, the freshmen and sophomores, that were there 2 years ago when they made a state finals run in 4A, those guys are upperclassmen now. So it's time to play clean baseball, even though with the new coach that's in his second year now, and take care of business in conference play and go on and compete for a state championship.
You mentioned Walnut Ridge. Newport is kind of talking about the eastern part of the state there. Melbourne also came in. I think they're unbeaten right now into spring break. Probably the question that many are wondering about is Rivercrest. He's sitting at 0-6 now. Rivercrest started preseason ranked number 2. And we know that some of these ones, whether we have them ranked high or low, that it's sometimes may not. Yeah, it's going to change for sure, especially in the early parts of the season, whether it be because of basketball, trying to mesh from that or whatever the case may be. But I think that if they were maybe sitting at 2-4, 3-3, not really thinking a lot about it, but 0-6 is certainly not saying we're giving up on them by any means or anything like that, but that's definitely a little bit more alarming than maybe 500 or even 2-4.
Yeah, and they've lost 4 games by a total of 4 runs. And 2, including 2 conference games. They lost to Walnut Ridge 2-1 and Manila 10-9. So it's one of those things to where they need to learn how to win close ball games. A couple years ago when they made that state title run, they didn't have a home field. Now they have a home field to play on. They got a really good complex up there in Wilson. So, figure out how to win those close games. You're 4-2, and you're probably still ranked number 2 or number 3 in the state right now. That's how close it is.
Then I like that you point out about the new field because that's a great transition into Class 2A. We'll start with number 4, Murfreesboro, who's off to a really good start. But they also are going to be playing at a new baseball field starting this week. They've got Mena, Taylor, and Ouachita. I think those games are going to be played either on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But Murfreesboro, again, they're rolling, doing really well, and now they've got a fresh place to start this second half of the season on. Yeah,
and they're one of those teams that really kind of they've been on my mind, and the last couple of years they've done pretty well. They get there and then just kind of fall short right at the end. But this year 8-3, they're 4-0 overall in conference play, which is down there in South Arkansas. They're in the 7-2A, I believe. But they lost to. They've won 6 of their last 7 games. They lost to Warren, who's a really good 4A school. Lost them 7-2. And then they had another out-of-state loss. But they beat Ouachita 13-11, who made the state championship last year. They beat Parker's Chapel 6-4. That was a huge win for them. And then they lost to Crossett 9-5. So 2 losses to 4A teams and then an out-of-state loss. So they're undefeated against their classification or anything below 4 in state right now. So, the Rattlers are going to be a team to contend with. That win over Parker's Chapel, that was 2 weeks ago now. 2 weeks ago today, in fact, on Wednesday. It was March 12th. Beat them 6-4. Really good win for them.
Then at the top, probably the actual main headline in this would be Riverside and Woodlawn flip-flopping. Now the Rebels are coming into the week at number 1, and they had the 5-0 head-to-head win over Woodlawn, lost to Russellville, Alabama, who's like I think a 16-4 5A school, and then Rehoboth, Alabama, a 6A school. So no shame in that. I guess that's the baseball edition of the Gulf Shores tournament, and then also. I mean, you think about just how they've fared, just getting off to this fast start, and again, with those only 2 losses being to schools that you kind of understand, this Riverside team's probably about clicking like we thought they would.
Absolutely, and we knew coming into the year because we had them ranked number 2, so it was just a matter of time, and they would have been ranked number 1 on March 17th had I known because they played Woodlawn on that Saturday. And so my fault to Rebel Nation about not having you ranked number 1 for 2 weeks in a row now. So, you lost to Nettleton. Nettleton's really good. Maddox Hampton, they're going to be competing in that 5A East, but you beat Gosnell 7-4. You beat Greene County Tech 6-2. Greene County Tech's going to be a 5A playoff team. It just shows you how good they are. And beating Woodlawn, that just says it all right there. So you beat Wynn 7-6. I mean, Pocahontas, they're down, but they got the arms to do it. They're scoring runs, and that was a really big confidence booster beating Woodlawn like they did. They're 3-0 in conference right now. They should roll right through it. Yeah, Rector's going to be down a little bit. EPC, another team in their conference, Piggott, Cross County. They have McCrory on April 15th, a really good non-conference matchup that I'll have my eyes on, and if I'm up there in Northeast Arkansas, I may get to go to the game.
I was also going to mention Woodlawn as well at that number 2 spot. Of course, that's been the team that we've talked about most in the last since you and I have done this together since 2022. And Tate Hall is coming. He's our reigning player of the week. Had in 5 games last week. He batted over 430 and pitched 6 innings. Did really well on the mound as well. So I know that probably the biggest question for Woodlawn are people asking, is this a revenge tour after the way that last year ended, or is this? I feel like probably a Tommy Richardson coach team is not looking, maybe using that a little bit as fuel, losing by a single run in the state championship game. But this is a new year, another team. I mean, of course, Tate Hall, it starts right there with him, the ASU Mountain Home signee, and once again, just another loaded Bears team.
Yeah, teams they've beaten: Monticello 6-1, Stuttgart 11-4, Walnut Ridge 8-4, Junction City 10-2, Camden Fairview 6-2. Beat Des Arc 16-1. That was their last game on Saturday. But they got Star City Ashdown, and then they get conference play Hampton next week. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough conference with Parker's Chapel, Ouachita. It was just one of those things last year. Ouachita caught lightning in a bottle. The last time Woodlawn did not win a state title, they won 3 straight. So that's and you got to give it to what Tommy Richardson says there. Look, and we've talked to him before. They're just worried about winning the next one. Take care of business now, and then how can we prepare our guys to win the next one on the schedule? So they won't get too high or too low. They're just going to go out and play baseball. Like you said, Tate Hall on a tear, committed to SAU Tech. Congratulations. He's our team-funded player of the week for this past week.
And also in that 7 spot, Hackett is an interesting case because they were 3A last year. Of course, they're the number 1 ranked team in softball as the defending 3A champions. But Hornets were a little bit up and down last year. They lost their final 3 games of the season. But how do you see them faring? I mean, obviously they're faring well right now, but coming into this week at 8-1 and really just doing well. Like I said, both softball and baseball are clicking.
Yeah, and that they kept playing teams and they get a win, and I just keep looking. They beat Danville 11-4. They beat Charleston 1-0. That's really kind of their signature win right now. They beat Lavaca 9-8. They did lose to Boonville 9-8. That kind of used to be a little bit of a rivalry, even though it's non-conference. Those teams are close over there. Beat Mansfield 8-6. I think, and this is the way everything looks from outside looking in right now, they have the inside edge to run the rest of their schedule. That's what they can do. They're 4-0 in conference play right now. Lavaca was a close game time to 8, but keep an eye on them. They're one of those teams at the end of the year could be sitting at 18-1 going into postseason play.
And then, of course, speaking of the outside looking in, a very familiar Cedar Ridge team in one of those spots, but the lone Northwest Arkansas team that we have in these rankings is Lifeway Christian. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really know, other than maybe a little bit of girls basketball that I covered this past year, I don't know much about Lifeway Christian athletics as a whole. But tell us a little bit about that team.
Yeah, so they're in Centerton, which Bentonville area, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so they don't participate in a lot of AAA sanctioned sports. That's just, that they compete in a few of them, boys and girls basketball. They do some cross country, things like that. So, they swept Ozark. They play doubleheader round robins. They're 6-0 in conference play. They beat Alpena 25-1, Ozark Catholic 29-2, Eureka Springs 42-0. They got 3. Pecola, Oklahoma beat them. They lost to a Kansas school, and then they just recently won in an event last week at spring break. They went 1-3 overall. So the Northwest corridor up there has always been kind of, since they lost Greenland ran roughshod through this conference last year. But Lifeway was one of those teams that, jumped up and beat them in a doubleheader last year. So they got rid of Greenland. If they can beat Mountainburg, that's a big conference game right there for them. They should control their own destiny throughout.
And last but not least, in Class 1A, has Taylor ever been at the top before? I think that might be a first if they've been ranked number one.
Over the last few years,
just once or twice. But the usual suspects, of course, we had a feeling that Taylor and Westside Greers Ferry, the 2 state finalists from last year, of course, for those that don't know, Taylor is the 3-time defending state champion. But kind of about exactly what we expected with these teams. Taylor won. You mentioned a second ago about how good Parker's Chapel is and how big of a win that was for Murfreesboro. That was one of Taylor's losses. And then since they've lost that game, Kevin, if I'm not mistaken, they've literally outscored Nevada, Bradley, and Junction City 70-0. Just an absolute tear. And then Westside lost to Midland in its opener, and they've won 7 straight. So the 2024 state finalists are doing about what we expected them to.
Yeah, lose to Ashdown 9-4. They beat a good Redwater, Oklahoma team 7-3. Beat Junction City 6-2, but that lost to Parker's Chapel. Look, they had to get ready for conference play. That was coming up. So yeah, Nevada 16-0, Bradley 32-0, Junction 22-0. They really got on them in that one. So Lafayette County, Columbia Christian, Hermitage, Bearden, just get ready. It's going to be a tough road to hoe going against the Taylor Tigers over the next few weeks. And the Westside Greers Ferry has been taking care of business, 9-1 right now, if I'm not mistaken, on the season. Brooks Hip, name to remember from that team, played in the state championship game last year, only a junior this year. So he's going to be playing, committing to a college here pretty soon. Armorell had a really good outing last week. They had back-to-back shutouts. Jackson Welch threw a no-hitter against Mark Tree. That was a 5-inning no-hitter, still counts. 10-0 win. So Armorell looks like the cream of the crop in their conference right there. Then you got a lot of the same teams that we've talked about the last couple of years because the programs just keep sustaining success over the course of 3 or 4 years. They're going to be good because teams want to go play there. And Viola 4-1, their loss, Westside Greers Ferry. St. Joe's 7-1, Mount Ida 8-0, Nemo 8-3. Norfolk moved out of the 2-2A or 2-1A away from Westside Greers Ferry and Viola to their own conference that they can go dominate. They won their spring break tournament last week. Was it 16-4 in the finals, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, actually, thanks, Coach Ethan Davis, for sending us that info. Yeah, it was so they beat Concord and then Yellville Summit of course, Yellville being the host of the Big Cat Classic in Yellville. They beat them in the championship round. And then 3 of the Panthers' 4 losses have come to top 5 teams, of course, Westside twice and Viola. But some individual stats from that championship game that the Panthers won. Ethan Light went 7 innings, gave up 8 hits and struck out 8, only walked 3. Maddox Chisholm, Cody Foster, and Evan as Palella, do you pronounce his? You know how I am with names.
Right, we'll double check.
All of them had multiple hits, of course, and Chisholm and Foster were 2 for 2. So, yeah, really big week there for the Panthers.
Yeah, and, Coach Dave, the Party Crashers, they still use it, but they're the hunted now. So, they're not crashing anybody's party, especially when, and kudos for still going and playing those tough teams. That's only going to get you ready for postseason play, because we know with 1A and 2A and sometimes in 3A, if you have one guy that you can beat just about anybody, you can make a run. If you got two, you can get pretty deep in the playoffs, whether it be regional or state. That usually can get you to a championship game in a regional, which sets you up for a good run in state tournaments. So get used to playing tough teams early. That'll be, help you out later on. Armorel, I just really like them right now. They got some guys that have been there in the program for 3 and 4 years. They've had success as a program. They've won a state championship. Viola, the Longhorns, can they get back? It's just a matter of Westside and Taylor just had a lock on those top 2 spots, seems like, for the last 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, that's right. And can't stress enough that this is the time of year that you can't look at records. You just pointed out, we've mentioned strength of schedule a couple of different times through the show. Yeah. People hear us talk about it all season long. And I think that this is really going to be that time. Maybe not this week, but as we get on into April and teams start making their race to get those state tournament, or, well, I guess in the lower classifications, more so the district and regional seeds, and then for 5 and 6A, the state seeds. But this is when all that's really gonna come to fruition. Playing that tough competition. Of course, staying healthy is a really big thing. I know during basketball season, the one thing about basketball is you got the sick seasons, as we call it, the January and February, when everybody's bringing stuff home. So hopefully this time, or I know that basketball in particular, it seemed like that the flu and all those different things that were going around really took a big hit on multiple teams. So hopefully during this spring season, the only thing that might mess us up a little bit is some pollen and just make our nose runny a little bit. We can stay clear of the rest of that. But Kevin, you'll be at some of those games, right, for the Robinson Invitational. It's Thursday through Saturday, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so you'll be at some of those.
Yep, I'll be out there. Robinson, North Little Rock, kick it off at Robinson. Jackson Estes will throw. I did find out that that's big. Greenwood and Valley View is at Robinson. That's at 6 p.m., I think. Really small. 3:45 on Saturday or Thursday. And then Valley View will play 2 teams from out of state. Actually, 2 teams from Kansas or Missouri. They'll play Raymore Peculiar, Ray Peck, who they beat 11-1 last year. And then they're going to play Staley out of Missouri, the Staley Falcons, who's also going to play Conway. Enid Plainsman out of Enid, Oklahoma. They're class 6A. I think they were like 27-14 last year. Really good 6A program. And then Benton. Benton is hosting some really good games over there. Looking to get over to Benton, especially on Friday. Jonesboro and Prairie Grove will play. Harding Academy in Nashville. Lake Hamilton will play Enid, Oklahoma. That's going to be a really good test for Matt Wiggins' Wolves right there. Greenbrier is playing Lake Hamilton out there. After that, then an interesting game at the nightcap. Lakeside and Shiloh Christian, 2 teams that have had really good success over the last couple of years. But, yeah, you got teams from, I think, 5 states, Tennessee. Olentangy Orange from Ohio is coming down. They're playing their first game of the year this weekend, and then they're going to play a couple of games. Then they're going to go over to, I think, Jackson, Mississippi, and play a couple of games because, weather up in Ohio and the Midwest, they don't start their season till the end of March at the earliest. So good for those teams to come down. Crossit and Lone Oak are going to play. They're going to play at Pulaski Academy. That's going to be a good outing. White Station, Tennessee is coming down. So a lot of good games, teams are coming in, looking, Conway going up against those out-of-state teams. That's what Leighton Hardin loves to do. They went to Dallas the last couple of years for the 5-tool invitational down in the Dallas Metroplex area. So for him to play in this tournament, stay home, get to play out-of-state teams just as well. They play Staley, Ray Peck, and Enid, I believe. So looking forward to getting out over the next couple of days. If you're out at one of these fields and see me, come up and say hi. I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, he's not as mean as he looks. So yeah, he'll definitely he'll definitely be nice to you, at least nicer than he appears. No, I'm kidding. But I'm just I was going to mention too that I think we're broadcasting 16 of these games, if I'm not mistaken,
16,
on the Natural.
hopefully
16
all
of
at
them.
Robinson.
Yeah, all at Robinson. So definitely tune into the Natural State Sports Network. If you want to catch the full preview of this Robinson Invitational, if you just go to the Natural State Sports Network on YouTube, just the same way that you search for this podcast, if you click on the live tab, it should be the very first or one of the first two on there. So really great preview that Steve, Coach Delaney, and Kevin did. So that will just about wrap it up. Let me give some love one more time to our sponsors, Athletic Field Service of Arkansas, the AFS logo that you see up there in the top left corner, lip removal and edging, anything that you need done on a natural surface. Jeremy Rice and his crew have you covered. Give them a call, 501-416-1218. That's 501-416-1218. Also, Boom Boom Floor Shine down in the Southwest Arkansas region, covering that entire area. Need some TLC for your VCT? Make sure and give them a call, 870-833-0521. And then last but not least, Chinook Cedar. I'm, of course, going in alphabetical order here. Chinook Cedar, go to ChinookCedary.com, type in promo code NSS Media at checkout to receive 10% off of any order, not just your first, but any order. So, right. Kevin, that'll wrap it up for this week. We will see thanks for everybody's patience with us. I know that it's been a little bit crazy. It always is, especially getting back from the basketball and then going full speed into baseball and softball, but we appreciate everybody's support. You guys have been great. This is year 4 that we have been able to do this, so it is always a pleasure. But other than that, for Kevin Bohannon and all of us here at Natural State Sports, that'll do it for episode 64. We will catch you next week.